Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. If you've been following this series, you'll remember that in the last video, we talked about skill rolls. I showed you the sort of general principle for how skill rolls work, which is that they pick a particular attribute, which can be different for the same skill for different personas, and we make a roll the equivalent of rolling 2 dice and then adding the attribute bonus and comparing that total to a set range of numbers. But the reason we were doing that, the reason we introduced that system, was that we have to make a skill roll when we hit with a chainsaw. Once a character successfully hits with a chainsaw, they have to make what's called a squick roll, a roll to sort of avoid being paralyzed with disgust. And if they fail, they are indeed paralyzed with disgust. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is the code for that specific attack. So just to refresh your memory, we end up, when we're on this skill roll passage, we end up with a value for Z2, which is going to be either -1, 0, 1, or 2, and that represents a long failure, failure, success, or long success, respectively, with a long failure and a long success being sort of more extreme failure and success, the equivalent of a critical miss and a critical hit in other systems, or a critical failure and critical success. So what do we do with the squick roll? Well, this happens in PC side attacks. So let's scroll down to the relevant code, which is, there we go. As the note says here, if an attack made with a chainsaw hits, the attacker must make a can squick roll. All of the skills are called can something, or lose an action. This turn if there's a spare, or next one if not. This turn, if there's a spare, meaning if there's a spare action. So we do what we need to do to get to the skill roll, which is we set the temporary variable y equal to the skill that we're rolling against, which in this case is can squick. We include skill roll, and then we are going to act if Z2 is less than 1. That means if there's a long failure or a failure. So in this particular case, a long failure and a failure have the same effect. That'll be true for some skill rolls. In other skill rolls, a long failure will have some sort of worse consequence. And similarly, in some roles, a long success will have a better consequence than just a normal success. But in this one, there's just success and failure. And it's very straightforward. We only act if Z2 is less than 1, which means if there's a failure or a long failure. And what we do depends on whether actions is greater than 1. Actions is the number of actions that the character has left. We haven't yet subtracted 1 for the attack that they've just made. Because remember, when we're doing this, they've just made an attack with a chainsaw, and in fact, they've just made an attack with a chainsaw that has hit. So it's if actions is greater than 1, which means if actions is 2, because there's only ever going to be 2 actions. That's the maximum that a character can have. But if actions is greater than 1, then we just reduce actions by an extra 1. Essentially, they sort of spend an action going, being disgusted by all the blood that's, splashed onto them, or, whatever, by the horrible sight of what the chainsaw has done, something like that. But it might be that this was their last action, and in that case, we need to make them miss an action next turn. And for that, we need the array squick. This array is the only new attribute that we need this video. It's set up very simply. It is a it's an array that, as the note says, it works identically to $prone, but $prone is when you get knocked over by the buffeting wings attack that the insects have, whereas this is based on failing the roll after hitting with the chainsaw. And as the note says here, it works identically to prone. And what that means, if we find prone, as it says here, prone 0 is set to 1 if the player character is prone. Otherwise, prone Z is set to 1 if companion Z is prone. So prone 0 is the player character, prone 1 is companion 1, prone 2 is companion 2, and similarly, squick 0 is the player character, squick 1 is companion 1, squick 2 is companion 2. So let's get back to where we were here. Sorry, obviously there's quite a lot of things happening here, so there's a fair bit of text to scroll through. But anyway, here we are. So if it's not the case that actions is greater than 1, then we set squick $INI_who equal to 1, which is a little note that says you're going to lose an action next turn. INI_who stands for who has initiative. And it'll be either 0 if it's the player character, or 1 or 2 if it's a companion. This passage, PC side attacks, is common to both the companions and the player character. Most of the code is sort of separate for the companions of the player characters because, of course, how the choices are made is quite different. The player chooses what the player character does, and the program sort of randomly chooses what the companions do, or it acts on particular attributes to do with orders they've received. But in this case, attacking works exactly the same. So we set squick INI_who equal to 1, and then we continue with reporting what's happening with the enemy and so on, all the stuff that we would do with any other attack. So when does that squick array come into play? Well, there's two different places. It's in the passage player character and in the passage companion. These are the passages that we go to when we've asked whose go is it, which is this passage here, and the answer is going to be either it's an enemy, in which case we go over here to enemy, it's a companion, in which case we go to companion, or it's the player character, in which case we go to player character. Enemies can't get squicked, so it only works here and here. So let's look at player character first. We have this check to see whether prone 0 is equal to 1. In other words, whether the player character has been knocked over. If so, we set that tag to 0. We say the player character stands up, and then we either go straight to the next action or we have a little button to continue if it's their second action. And the effect of that is just that they go to next action, and when we go to next action, we always reduce the variable actions by 1. So standing up was their action. They don't get to choose to do anything. And we have identical code for if squick 0 is equal to 1, except that instead of setting prone 0 to 0, we set squick 0 to 0, and instead of saying the player character stands up, we say the player character is too disgusted to act. We have exactly the same if/else/if structure, and it boils down to saying that you miss a turn, you miss an action out of disgust. And the companion one, it works exactly the same, except that we don't have that button to continue. We always just include the next action. So that's if this companion is prone, and then we have exactly the same thing if that's not true, but squick is set to 1, the relevant slot in squick is set to 1. Identical code, except that we're setting a different array to 0 and we're giving a different message, but the effect is the same, which is that you waste an action. And so that is the consequence of using a chainsaw and and failing the using a chainsaw, hitting, and then failing the resulting roll. You still do the damage, you still might kill the enemy, but you may miss a turn because it's so sort of visually horrific. And that is the chainsaw. That's one special weapon dealt with. There are more, and that's probably most of what I'm going to be doing in the immediate future. I also have to do a little bit of a change to the skill roll because I haven't dealt with the non-player character only personas, the ones that aren't the warrior or the scientist, etc., the ones that are like child and old person and that sort of thing, the ones that are actually less powerful as well. I haven't sorted out. I have sorted out how to do it, but I haven't coded that knowledge into the skill roll passage yet. So I have to do that. I also have to deal with some special weapons. That's what I'll be doing in the immediate future. But for now, I will leave it there. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.